In this video, I'm going to be talking about the properties of RWX renderware models when you use them in Worlds, and how you can adjust the properties to make the model look more how you'd prefer it. And the first thing to talk about is how your model is lit. If you import a model without changing anything in the RWX file, you might see one of these things where the model is either completely black or completely white. This is because it's not lit properly. Worlds uses two kinds of lighting, diffuse and ambient, and you can change every part of the model to use different values for these two lightings to create whatever effect you want. You can think of diffuse lighting as a constant even light across the whole model, and on a lot of models you'll commonly see diffuse 1.0 right at the start so that the whole model is lit evenly. Lighting values can be between 0 and 1, so in this example I changed the diffuse lighting of the question mark piece to be half that of the main body, and you can see that it's much duller than the rest. In every world there's a light source, and you can think of ambient lighting as how much your model reflects light in that direction. So you see I changed the body of our model here to have a higher than 0 ambient lighting, and it's very reflective when it's facing that direction. For example, you could use ambient lighting like I did with this CD model, where the back would be shiny while the front label would not. You might also see this keyword surface. This is a short way of defining all the lighting types in one line, where you type surface, and then the ambient, and then the diffuse, and then the specular lighting. But you can just put 0 for specular because that is not something that works in Worlds. You might have noticed that the model looks very polygonal. You can change how smooth the model looks with the light sampling keyword. Here I've changed the light sampling from the default to vertex, and you can see that the lighting is much more smoother. You don't see the edges of the model quite so much. Next, I'm going to talk about coloring and texturing your model. When working with image textures, you're going to want to model it in a real modeling program and then convert it into an RWX. That way all the UVs will be correct as you set them up in your initial thing. But you will notice that there's some weird warping with image textures, so we're going to talk about options to fix that. So we're going to be using the texture mode keyword, and one of the most common arguments for that is foreshorten. You'll see that there's no more warping on the texture, but it's also always brightly lit no matter where the light source is. Now what's great is that you can use multiple texture modes on a single texture, so you can have the best of both worlds here, where we're using foreshorten to reduce the warping, but we're also using lit, which allows light to affect the texture. The third and final texture mode option is filter, which applies an anti-aliasing effect to the image texture. It's kind of old and bad, and in my experience it never really looks good, but maybe you'll find a use for it. If you just want part of your model to be a solid color, you don't have to go through the trouble of making a texture image for that. You can just use the color keyword. You put the word color followed by RGB in the form of decimals. Now how you get this is that you take a normal RGB color and then you divide each number by 255. For example, the purple color that I use on the shoe of this model, the RGB was 72, 22, 132, and here I show the division that gets me the decimals that I use in the RWX file. Next we have geometry sampling. This is a bit of an interesting one. So what you're seeing now is the wireframe argument. This shows only the edges of the clump that you put it in. This one might be a little hard to see, but this is the point cloud geometry sampling. This only shows the vertices, the points of the model. Opacity is a very useful feature to use. This one's simple. You just put a decimal after the word opacity on the part that you want to be slightly transparent. The last chapter here is going to be about geometric operations, about positioning and such of the model. The first one is scale. This one's easy. You just put scale and then a number to scale the X, Y, and Z by. And this makes it bigger or smaller by that amount. One trick that I've learned is that you can mirror a clump by scaling it to negative values. Next is rotate. The first three numbers are the axis to rotate around, and the last number is the degrees to rotate it. Then there is translate, which is just moving an object in 3D space, like sliding it. Like how the three lighting commands had surface, there's a transform command that rolls all of these geometry ones into one line, but you need to kind of know matrix algebra to get the numbers right, so I would just use the three that we just talked about individually. Axis alignment is a little hard to explain without showing you, so here's Z orient Y. The Y direction is preserved no matter which way you're facing the clump. And here's Z orient X. Similarly, it preserves the X direction no matter which way you're looking at. You should only use axis alignment on some parts, not the whole model, because that will almost definitely crash. Then finally, there's the XYZ alignment. This aligns it to your camera in any direction. So say if I raise my camera up here for a second, it maintains that it's always looking at me. So that's everything that I want to go over in this video. I will link a resource in the description about more in-depth details about each of the commands that I went over here. You will see that RWXs were much more used in active worlds that came after worlds.com, and there were things like making animated avatars with them and animated textures on them, and a whole bunch of commands that won't work with worlds. As a rule of thumb, if it's considered an extended command, it won't work with worlds at all. The other thing that I have seen that doesn't really seem to work with worlds.com is masking textures. This is, you would create a second bitmap mask of a texture to create transparent image textures. I would just use a CMP with comp image instead. I explained this in another video. It's much more consistent, and I don't think mask works. Anyway, thanks for watching.